What have we learned this summer? That and more this week on the couch. Couch is back. Last little rest before the real marathon, Paul Charchian. But first, when I ask you, what have we learned so far this summer? What stands out?
I think George Pickens is topic number one, isn't it?
Right.
From your Steelers, we knew that there was the possibility, the physical tools were all there for him to do exactly what he's done, but you still want to see it. And Sig, I don't know about you, what I look for in the preseason. So maybe we even start here.
Sure.
There's so much misinformation to be had in the preseason, and it's so easy to overcorrect when you look at what's happening in the preseason. But one of the things you look for, if you got tip of the spear indicators, somebody looks really, really good, somebody looks really, really bad, I think you're foolish not to react to that. George Pickens looks like everything that you could hope him to be. And right now, I think he's moving into a conversation where in a rookie dynasty draft, you have to do some real evaluation on who the first wide receiver is you're going to take now.
Well, some of that reflects how closely packed that top five was. I'll say this: I moved Pickens ahead of Treylon Burks. Okay, I'm not necessarily ready to put him ahead of Wilson and Olave, and of course Williams. Actually, Williams at the top of that group in London. Little bump in the road for London with that knee injury. But you're right that in terms of pure ability, Pickens looks like the classic alpha one that we loved in fantasy football like 10 years ago. Right. I mean, just the highlight reel guy. Now, as a Steelers fan, I have to say the ghost of Martavis Bryant hovers over this. Right. I mean, it's just a player that oozes ability and makes highlight reel plays, but character was the reason he fell in the draft, and character was the reason that Pickens fell in the draft. But yeah, Pickens looks unbelievable. Now, what can we do with this for fantasy, though? What makes this actionable? Because, I mean, is the actionable advice here not so much to take Pickens, like you said, in Dynasty Leagues, the actionable advice is, wow, Pickens should have been going higher in rookie drafts. And if your rookie draft hasn't happened yet, then move Pickens up as high as you feel comfortable. But in redraft leagues, I'm not buying the Steelers' pass offense. Is it maybe just one more reason to not buy the Steelers' pass offense?
Well, I mean, there's that, but then there's also, it's a very small sample size. Kenny Pickett looked really good.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that, when I'm combining, if we believe Kenny Pickett's going to be close to his draft level, his draft equity, then in theory, this team has got a quarterback that can power a passing game for hopefully at least the foreseeable future, years wise. And then now I want to believe that this could be a really diverse, interesting offense. When you look, advance the clock a year, Sig. Najee Harris is still great. They finally put they finally addressed their offensive line in this next offseason. Pickett's had a year to learn, or maybe he got half a season of experience and he's ready for a much better next season next year. And I don't know, this offense looks pretty diverse next season, don't you think? Or am I just being Pollyanna-ish?
Well, you can be Pollyanna-ish because I'm a Steelers fan and I'm going to be neurotic and I'm going to be negative. Well, I mean, I'll say this: they have to have an offensive line. They have to rebuild the offensive line.
Yes.
Whatever is going to happen, the car is not going to get out of the driveway until the offensive line is NFL quality. I mean, I'm not saying one of the best offensive lines in the league, but our best offensive lineman might be a Bears cast off, and the Bears offensive line isn't exactly a model for success either right now. So, but that being said, with Pickett, and I think for this year, again, if we're just narrowing to redraft right now, for this year, Pickett looked good. And I think that it's interesting. There's already a theme emerging here. Rookies. We're going to talk about more rookies. And you started to do a larger take on, well, how do you get good, actionable information out of preseason? First, rookies. I mean, how do you separate what you should actually act on versus the things that cause you, as you said, to overcorrect? And I like the idea that you should try to correct, or you should not feel free to ignore these things. The question is the right amount of reaction. And rookies, that initial reveal, Paul, we can always look back and say, often the first chapter clued us in. We should have known. And the rookies, like later on, and we look back and say, well, there were a lot of signs that they could play from day one, and that's how they stand out, and that's why we're going to talk about a lot of rookies in this show. And Kenny Pickett, going back to him, I think what he showed in the preseason opener was he'll get the ball out quickly, he'll trust his reads, he'll process at a speed, at least in terms of preseason, that is quick enough, and he'll take the layups, and hopefully this offense can create those. Now, I don't know if that's going to translate to immediate success for George Pickens. Again, I know a lot of people like Chase Claypool. I just don't know how Pickens and, in best ball, they can both get fed. Mm-hmm. But in a league where you have to set your lineups every week, I think it complicates things for Claypool as a downfield target, although I don't know that Kenny Pickett is going to be availing himself of that many downfield targets. I know Mitchell Trubisky's probably not going to. So maybe all roads lead back to Najee Harris and Deontay Johnson as those short targets. And I think short-range targets, and I think the Pickett getting the ball out quickly actually bodes well for Deontay Johnson. I'm still not taking him over Amon-Ra St. Brown, by the way. Okay.
Oh, all right.
So, I would say when you're ready to take Deontay Johnson, Amon-Ra St. Brown's probably still on the board. Take him, or if you think you can get them both, take them both. But I think that's a little ray of sunshine for Deontay Johnson. And we'll see. But you're right. The Steelers, and hey, Calvin Austin hasn't looked bad either, by the way. Calvin Austin is not a gadget player. Calvin Austin's not Dre Archer. I know the Steelers. I'm bringing back all the ghosts of Steelers receivers, right? Because of the list of failures is shorter than the list of successes. They've had a lot of successes.
They have.
And they've done it. You need an offensive line. Okay, more rookies. Now, again, I'm going to frame this, Paul, in what's actionable, because we do have a running back emerging for the Texans.
Yes.
Can Dameon Pierce overcome a backfield that gave us one good fantasy game from Rex Burkhead last year?
I think he's already done it. I don't think there's any real competition here. Do you? This has been sort of my guy since the draft, and I loved the landing spot and felt like worst case scenario for Pierce was a very probable goal line role for him. But now it looks apparent that the role can be dramatically bigger than that. And when you look at the competition, there's not much to beat out. You've got Marlon Mack, who hasn't been right since the Achilles, Rex Burkhead, and we know the long story on where he really is. And Freeman is not a factor. Dare Ungabawale, not a factor. So I think we've got our new starter, and he looks good. And did I like him in college. And I like the way they used him in college, including seam passes. They threw to him a lot for a bigger bodied guy. The seam pass use that they had in Florida was remarkable. And he wasn't like hauling 40 catches a season, but they would throw to him 15, 20 yards downfield. And I love that about Dameon Pierce. But the big distinguishing characteristic for me is the footwork. For a bigger bodied guy, I love the nimble footwork and his ability to pick through lanes, be evasive that way. I think he can be a special back. There's some worry that they didn't use him extensively at Florida. He was typically getting 12, 14 touches a game, but that doesn't mean he's not capable of having an expanded role that could get him into 18 touches a game, workhorse level back. And I'm full tilt on him. I'm ready to go. To me, this feels like a done deal. I've got him sitting right now at running back 25. Maybe that's optimistic, but that's where I've got Dameon Pierce sitting right now.
Well, the price makes it easy. I'll say this, a theme that I saw emerging before the preseason, before camp, and I'm only getting more reinforced and dug in on, Paul, is that I really like the 6th to 11th round at running back. I think this is the zero running back do the opposite upside down year, because and the thing is, and you add Dameon Pierce to the mix, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like at running back 25, you're taking him over the Seattle backs, you're taking him over the New England backs, you're taking him over the Buffalo backs. Does it sound about right?
Yes, it does. And by a fair margin, most of those cases, yes.
Yeah. So, and it's just another reason. I think that you definitely only need to take one running back in the first 5 rounds, but you probably can get away with taking no running backs in the first 5 rounds this year because there's enough choices that you can even miss on a few of those choices and still have players to fall back on. We'll talk about some more of those players. But yeah, with Pierce, my only worry is just the Texans running game was putrid last year. But Davis Mills should be better. This team should be better. They were really in disarray coming into the season last year, and they played with a lot of pride. They pulled it together. Pierce in the preseason game, like you said, the footwork, the urgency. I love running backs that run with urgency, no wasted movement, and a little bit of slipperiness, but with power. Like we usually don't say a running back has power and he's slippery, but when it comes time to wrap him up, you saw he was always squirting forward for another 2 or 3 yards. Really tough to get a clean hit on. And Marlon Mack, who says he's back from the Achilles, Rex Burkhead, utility knife. But you're right that Pierce is going to emerge. And I think that you want to catch a rising star, and the price is still right. And I like the idea of having, if not Dameon Pierce, a few players that you're willing to take a round or 2 or 3 higher than ADP, even as the ADP goes up. Let's talk about another player, same vein, running with urgency. What I said about this dude is that watching him on tape at Rutgers, he just runs like every carry, like his life depends on it.
Yeah. And at Rutgers, it does, by the way.
Yeah, you're at Rutgers. Yeah, it's true. That's a good point. Isiah Pacheco. And this is a guy, again, I feel like, look, if Pacheco matters, and it's really not that difficult for him to matter because just as much as we've heard, like almost for every positive Pacheco piece or note, Paul, we've seen something negative about Ronald Jones or the absence of something positive, right? And I remember, I think it was Charles Goldman, who covers the Chiefs for USA Today. Before camp started, he left Jones off of the 53, and there were people saying, come on. But now that's looking prescient, and he's not the only one doing that. But we have Pacheco, who seems to be clearly ahead of Jones. Derek Gore, who showed a little bit of promise, he has a neck injury. Jerick McKinnon, they know what he can do, and he was very important for that team last year, but there's a reason he was sitting in free agency for so long. So you have Pacheco. Again, I guess the question is, how eager should we get? Are we moving him ahead of some of these? Again, I'll just use that New England, Seattle, Buffalo back tier as a benchmark. Were you considering him in that range now?
I'm not there. I'm not at that level yet with him, but boy, if you advance the clock to say Halloween, don't you feel, which is only really Halloween's what, about week 7 of the NFL season. So if we go to Halloween, do you feel like it's any worse than an even time share between Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
What has Clyde Edwards-Helaire done to show us that he's going to dominate a backfield or hold anybody off? And I still like, hey, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is another reason to wait at running back.
Yeah.
Because he was better than you think last year for fantasy. I know we think of last year as a disappointment, but he had touchdowns, I think, in half of his games. And he was still getting involved enough as a pass catcher that he was at least a reasonable floor running back too. And you're drafting him as a low running back too, or even a flex right now. Why not both? Why not Pacheco too? Because he just has that momentum. And I guess, Paul, it's like the opposite. I was thinking, I watched a lot of game shows when I was a kid. The Price is Right. Remember the Price is Right, the mountain climber?
Of course.
I'm a horrible yodeler. I have no Scandinavian in my background, so I can't really yodel or Swiss or whatever. I'm not Alpine. I'm not Alpine. But the point is, in the mountain climber, whatever they called it, the mountain climber would start up, and you wouldn't know where he would stop. And sometimes he would go over the cliff, and that's it. The game would be over. Dun, 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 but in this case with the rookies, it's like we don't know how high they're going to go in terms of their role, in terms of their fantasy value. We just know it's going up. And I think that applies to Pickens. It applies to Pierce. It applies to Pacheco. I guess it's a year to be a rookie whose last name starts with a P. So, and there's, it's interesting too, for those people that love deep leagues, there's a lot of other guys, by the way, like, Shamar Bridges and Isaiah Likely in Baltimore.
Yeah, didn't he look good?
Isaiah Likely is a baller.
He is.
And I love, I was talking with somebody on Twitter and they said, well, it's too bad that Mark Andrews, he's a receiver. Isaiah Likely can be a wide receiver. don't look at the opportunity at tight end in this offense. Just look at the opportunity in the passing game.
There you go.
And I think it was Scott Barrett, my buddy, who pointed out that John Harbaugh himself said, I don't see Likely as just a tight end. And it's funny how the dominoes work, because they wanted Calvin Austin. The Steelers took Calvin Austin to pick before them. And they got their punter or something before that, even though the Bills got the best punter in the draft, right?
Clearly.
Punt God, living up to his, the best highlight of week 1, if you like punting, the preseason. And then they just say, well, even though we took Charlie Kolar, let's just take Likely too. We like him that much. And actually, it was Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl that said that some teams had Likely as high as tight end 2 on their board until his testing. Which is like, come on, NFL. You should know better than fantasy football people and knock someone down for testing. But when you're a small school prospect and they don't have tape of you playing with NFL quality athletes, maybe the NFL put a little bit too much into that. But anyway, there's a lot of rookies to talk about. But Paul, I'm going to prevail on you because you are in Minnesota. We got to talk Minnesota. Although there hasn't been a big Minnesota story. Usually whenever we schedule a show, maybe by the time the show's over, we'll have something. So Dalvin Cook, let's start with the specific, but then we'll talk more big picture. Dalvin Cook excitement, because offense excitement, but Cook missed some time last year. We know him for missing time, so we always want to know who's behind him. That's been Alexander Mattison. Is it Alexander Mattison this year?
If you'd have asked me 2 days ago, I would have said probably Alexander Mattison. But now, 1 game later, I'm not so sure about it. There was a lot of misgivings about Mattison that I heard over the course of the offseason, and people that had told me that they would not, the expectation is that he was not going to be back next year, which is part of why they spent a 4th-round pick on Ty Chandler from North Carolina. And at the time, which, the draft pick seemed a little odd at the time, and when they drafted him, that was the word back, was they don't think they're going to keep Mattison, and this was going to be potentially a Chandler job next season. But Vikings game on Sunday, Ty Chandler jumps off the screen. He looked amazing, ran so hard and so fast. And there's a real chance here. And Mattison, by the way, looked slow. He keeps missing holes, which is a constant problem for him and been a source of great frustration. Dalvin Cook's amazing. The vision's fantastic. The cutting, when he sees his spots, he just, plants on foot, and Dalvin Cook is there. Mattison's never been able to do that, and he's left a lot of yards on the field. I don't think that there is right now a safe handcuff that you want to take to Dalvin Cook, because I can't tell you that it's Mattison anymore. It could be Kene Nwanwu, who also looked good, but Ty Chandler looked unbelievable. And when you look into some of his measurables, it's remarkable. He was a high school track star. He ran a 4.38 at the combine. He averaged 6 yards per carry for North Carolina, and he can catch. They put him and they catch all throughout the field. And when he gets open with any kind of ability to get some vertical speed going, it's goodbye. If you watch through the highlights, he's guy. If when given an opportunity, given any kind of lane, Ty Chandler, 4th-round pick, he took advantage of almost all of those plays. And there could be something here for Ty Chandler, a guy nobody was talking about, and even me, I didn't expect a lot until now. This was it was eye-opening. It's only 1 game. I'm not making too much of it, but it's certainly worth watching.
And what makes it even more worth watching, Paul, in my opinion, is you have a brand new regime, like top to bottom. Well, I guess that they kept some of the personnel people. It wasn't a total clean sweep of the personnel.
Almost, right? Yeah. They did keep a few. They kept a few scouts, right? Ryan Munnins. They kept a couple of coaches, Keenan McCardell, most notably. But yeah, it's largely a redo here. And frankly, I mean, everybody we talk to, they aren't throwing Zim under the bus by name, but man, are they happy with the new regime and the new offense. Players will very openly talk about how excited they are for this, and we'll see if it translates.
I call it the ding dong, the witch is dead factor. I think we've got it in Jacksonville. We've got it for the Giants. I don't know that the Bears players and team had any personal problems with Matt Nagy, but I think there's a lot of signs that he wasn't very competent in terms of his offensive game planning, head coaching. But Minnesota has that too. And the difference between Minnesota and those other teams is that they were already a pretty good team with a lot of good pieces in place. Yeah. So I think that this is really interesting to think of the Vikings. And I also, when I want to forecast some Jags or Giants or Bears breakout players, just because, wow, now they have competent coaching. Sometimes it takes a year, right? I mean, the first year you sort out the wheat from the chaff, who's part of the program, who takes to all the new ways that you're going to run the team, the new schemes, and et cetera, sorting out, again, like with this Ty Chandler, you have some players the new regime brings in, you have some players that are left over from the old regime, and you're figuring it out. And then in year 2 is when these offenses, especially with young quarterbacks, that might be when we see a breakout for a Christian Kirk or whoever. Now, Minnesota was close to a finished product. And I, like you said, and I'm glad you touched on it because I was going to walk over there anyway and see what you would divulge. When you listen to the Vikings players, they're excited. They're really, really excited to play for Kevin O'Connell, to play in this new offense, to see what they can do. And let's face it, the NFC continues to be pretty wide open, honestly. So why not the Vikings?
There's going to be an oddball team that gets into the playoffs and does a little bit of damage here, I think. Much like, the Bengals were a 4-win team, got to the Super Bowl a couple years before that. San Francisco, 4-win team, got to the Super Bowl. NFC is so wide open. We're going to see some teams that are way off radar.
Let's just do some rapid fire stuff with the Vikings before we turn the page to lots of other good stuff. Okay. Percent, I'll put it this way, percent chance that Justin Jefferson is more valuable for fantasy than Cooper Kupp?
I think it's 55%.
Yeah, well, there you go. Anything over than 5 or 10 would be eyebrow raising, right?
Yes.
But I'm with you. If he's saying he's doing everything that Kupp is doing, then, and that's what you're hearing too, that he's in that role in this offense.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean they're going to use him and move him to run predominantly out of the slot, although I do expect plenty more reps out of the slot. But what they're going to do is use a lot of the same schematics for getting players open that the Rams did. And that's, that was both Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. I mean, Robert Woods, if you just take the second wide receiver for the Rams last year, whether it was Woods for the beginning part of the season, Van Jefferson for a couple of games during the transition, and then OBJ, you had roughly a wide receiver 12 average coming through there. And that was the number 2 wide receiver. So the feeling here around here is extreme optimism that, the skill set is so translatable between Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson that they're going to schematically get him open a ton.
Yeah, and he's pretty good at doing that on his own. If you have a pick in the second half of your draft for a Viking pass catcher, should it be Irv Smith or KJ Osborn?
I don't trust Irv Smith.
Yeah, I would take a thumb now. A thumb, really?
No, and it isn't even just that. It's they're you hate to say too many of these things, but there's some whispers about maturity and some other things for Irv. So, and he's still very young and pretty green. So, we'll see. He's a nice kid. I've met him a couple of times, but KJ Osborn's coming off the best wide receiver 3 season in the history of the Vikings. And it wouldn't take a lot for him to nudge up just even a little bit on that and become a quasi reliable fill-in type player. But can we talk just briefly before we move on from the Vikings about Adam Thielen?
Yeah, because I think you have the high touchdown efficiency, but you also have a player who the cliff isn't necessarily as steep for wide receivers, but he's at least over the peak of the hill.
Correct. So let's talk about this. We know he's been the number 1 most efficient touchdown scorer on passes inside the 10 over the last 2 years. Kirk Cousins has absolute trust for him in that part of the field. And the previous regime used him there, and it converted at an extraordinary rate. And so you assume Kevin O'Connell will as well. And if you look at what the Rams did last year, they were number 3 in pass percentage inside the 10 last year, and they were number 2 in conversions into touchdowns from inside passes inside the 10. So this team loved to throw. Kevin O'Connell loved to throw there. It's all lining up for a potentially eye-popping touchdown number. for Adam Thielen. And now you just hope he stays healthy. For whatever it's worth, the Vikings moved on from their athletic trainer from the past 2 seasons. And that may have been a contributing factor to Thielen being, effectively re-injuring himself a couple of times. And so, if he can just stay healthy or mostly healthy, Thielen's got really crazy touchdown upside, I think.
Yeah, well, just this whole offense, right? Everybody needs to. I've been saying this, and we're getting to the point now where we have to start committing and the draft season's here.
Yeah, it
is. But leading up to this first week of preseason is kind of a threshold. We're now, it's time getting out of the nitty gritty, and we're gonna have to commit. But you should really just be making your mind malleable to the possibilities and really understanding the range of possibilities, so that as we get the real data points when September, when the season starts, you can act accordingly. And I think that the fact that the Minnesota offense could be an elite fantasy offense that creates multiple overachievers. Like you said, comparing to the Rams, 2 top 12 receivers, that's not impossible. 3 top 30 receivers, not impossible. Dalvin Cook, at least in the weeks that he's healthy, being a top 3 running back, not impossible, right? That's what we need to be open to. And then if we see that, what do we have week 1? The Packers, right?
Oh, the schedule's very favorable for Minnesota, really through the whole season.
And Green Bay is an excellent test, okay? Because Green Bay has a tremendous front 7. And if they can get the drop on them in week 1, then that should make you really bullish. And then in week 2, they're going to get Philly, then they're going to get Detroit. Those are defenses they should be able to, they're going to be easier than Green Bay. Then they get New Orleans and Chicago. Miami's defense is tough. Arizona, Washington, Buffalo. I mean, it isn't exactly a schedule that strikes any fear in your heart. So just be ready. I think that's whether you want to put your chip on Osborn or taking Cook. And I have remorse. I was taking Mixon over Cook on the offense. But now I'm looking back and all this excitement about the Minnesota offense. Cook is a way to get part of that, although you don't have that sure thing injury upside backup in the form of Mattison. All right.
Just one last thing. I already said there would be one last thing, but I want to make it clear. Vikings offensive line's been horrible for 5 years. The most improved player in camp is their left tackle, Christian Darrisaw, first rounder last year. And they're getting splashy play out of their new right guard, Ingram, and that looks Ed Ingram looks very promising, and he was fantastic for whatever it's worth in week 1. Earned a PFF grade of 88 for his play, and we got a long look at him, and he looked really good. So optimism that way as well here in Minnesota.
Let's talk about some more optimism. First, I want to give you a chance because you were 2 years ago really excited about Zack Moss. Now, Zack Moss has had trouble staying healthy, but that might be the key to understanding what we should expect from Zack Moss this year. Back from the dead, back at least into our late round consideration.
Maybe, and if nothing else, you figure you have to give just a little bit more hesitation on whether or not what you want to do with James Cook. And Zack Moss played hurt for much of last year, as you know, Sig, and I was very optimistic about the opportunity that he would have. Didn't see Devin Singletary as a massive impediment, although in fairness, Singletary was shockingly good through especially the second half of last year. But now, the reports out of camp were all like, Zack Moss looks fantastic. Zack Moss doing stuff. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And right now, to this point, it looks like Zack Moss, who put up 37 yards on 3 carries in the preseason game, it looks like we need to at least factor him into our consideration when you're looking at that backfield. And that he could end up muddying the waters. I don't know that Zack Moss is somebody I want to draft, put on my team, but he could end up siphoning off enough work that it really ends up materially harming the other players in that backfield. And I think for only that reason, I think it's worth tracking Zack Moss. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think I'm going to take a more positive view of it just because I think Devin Singletary at an 8th, 9th round price is still woefully underpriced. Just because we saw he was a fantasy running back 1 when he was uncontested last year. And I'm not saying he's going to be uncontested, but that just shows you what he can do if he's uncontested. And the team is, I think, finally treating him like an incumbent starter. They're treating him like a core piece of the offense. So you got a core piece of the Buffalo offense in the 8th or 9th round, just close it down. I don't care. I mean,
Yeah.
Now you're right though that Zack Moss could steal some touchdowns. Zack Moss, I think, could just make this offense even better. But the larger takeaway here is in fantasy, and I'm sure I've been guilty of this. I'll be guilty of it again. We tell ourselves the why and we just move on. And yes, Zack Moss by the end of the year looked like he was a non-factor in this offense. And then they draft James Cook, and you're like, yeah, they really are ready to move on from Zack Moss. But then you hear, and I started hearing this a few months ago, Paul, that it was the ankle injury last year, that he never got over the ankle injury. And now you're seeing it more frequently, talking about it, even after the first preseason game, that yes, Zack Moss himself saying, I never really got over that ankle injury, which was actually surgically repaired, I think, after his rookie year. And now he's over it. So it's just another reason the Buffalo offense could be even better. And it's more to me, it's this idea of don't close the book and think you know why certain things happen. Still be open to revising that when you're projecting these offenses, because Zack Moss is back, staying in Buffalo. And this is one, and I just think that, again, we can go back and look last year, and I think it was 2 games that Cole Beasley missed, and Isiah McKenzie was more productive. Yeah. And then they go get Jamison Crowder, and they draft Khalil Shakir. And look, one of the things you need to take away here is Khalil Shakir looks like he's going to be good next year. But this year, maybe it's McKenzie's year.
I think he starts, and I am interested in a slot receiver who will be on the field probably 2/3 of the snaps in the Buffalo offense. Yeah, I'm interested in Isiah McKenzie. And plus you get the freakish athletic traits, right?
Right.
All of the speed and, all the other special things that he brings onto the field that makes him after the catch really, really tricky guy to bring down. And, we look at, it's funny because he's been in the league a long time. He's never gotten, I want to say like 30-ish receptions is his high water mark in any season. So it seems funny that this would be the breakout, like season 7 or whatever would be the breakout season for him. But maybe it is. And maybe it all comes together right here for Isiah McKenzie. And he's somebody that's certainly worth watching. And Jamison Crowder's doesn't seem to be a factor here at all.
No. And that's, there's 2 sides of the coin. It's that McKenzie has been impressing and playing like a starter and treated like a starter. And Crowder has done nothing to give the team pause when considering him that way. McKenzie, that is, as the starter. I'm going to go back and look, actually. So it was just 1 game, not 2 games. But in that 1 game last year that Beasley missed, McKenzie had 11 catches for 125 yards and a touchdown.
Jeez.
And now Gabriel Davis was also out in that game too. So, take with that what you will, but if it's 11 for 125 and a touchdown, and that was with Diggs being 7 for 85 and a touchdown. It was a game against New England, actually. It was the game when they just really thoroughly showed New England, like, we're your daddy now, by the way. And then that was after New England had beaten them 14-10 in like kind of a slop fest. But, Josh Allen threw for 3 touchdowns in that game and so on. And I think that it is the guys, again, going back to the Zack Moss take, this could be just a tremendous, tremendous, tremendous offense. And it could create overachievers, Dawson Knox. I know my man Jacob in the chat room is bringing up Dawson Knox. We already brought up Devin Singletary. We're bringing up McKenzie. Okay, this is going to be a little bit shorter of an hour, folks, because of our schedules. And I want to do off the rails. This is going to just be a very specific topic because I want to see what you think of my work, Paul. But before that, I want to do like a lightning round, okay?
Yeah.
Where I'm just going to throw a statement out and you can just tell me whether you're buying or selling it, okay? All right. We should be a little wary about the Tampa offense because Tom Brady is just taken off from the team for a week and a half during camp.
I'm a yes. And I look at the totality of the distraction and change that has happened to this team in the offseason. Gronk leaving, your head coach just arbitrarily deciding to leave, seemingly out of the blue. Brady having been retired once before, 3 offensive linemen that have defected, and granted they replaced some of that, but it's still, I just feel like tons of change. Chris Godwin looks promising. We still don't know but we still don't know the degree to which he's going to be back at full health and when. There's just the totality of all of the weirdness that has happened around that team in this offense. I don't think magically goes away, even with the steadying influence of Tom Brady. I'm nervous. I've moved all of my bucks have all slid down a little bit because of it. So yeah, I'm buying the weirdness. What about you?
Yeah, well, the Brady thing is just odd, but I think, like you said, it's an indicator of more instability. Was it Todd Bowles that said when they asked him about Brady being gone for 10 days, he said, "That's the least of our worries"? Isn't that the quote? Something like that.
I think you're
Um,
right.
it indicates more than we're aware of. And like you said, I mean, Ryan Jensen, the center, is probably out for the year. Doesn't look good there. I think they're still waiting to learn the full extent of his injury. I think that you're right that this might not be the fantasy bonanza. And then you had Julio Jones complicating things.
Yeah.
Mark Evans already has a hamstring again. All right. Similar one. Buy or sell. We should be hesitant to project the Rams at their ceiling because of Matthew Stafford's elbow.
I don't love that it's still a factor. I didn't think it would be at this time.
Neither did the team.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And I'm worried that they're already doing some pain management and some rep management with him.
Yeah.
And does this mean, it's August? Is this going to be better in November?
Exactly.
I don't think so.
No.
So, I do have some worry here. And I've moved Stafford down from a high of around quarterback 7 at one point. Right now he's quarterback 13. And I'm worried that he's not going to be practicing on Wednesdays and maybe not on Thursdays. And the light reps and what is this? What does it really mean for him? And I assume practice matters. They wouldn't have players doing it. I'm nervous about him already sore, looking into the teeth of a 17 game schedule.
Right,
so
right.
Yeah, I have some caution, and maybe I've heard a lot of people that have taken the other side of this are like, it's don't overreact, but I'm a little bit nervous about it.
Yeah, don't feel free to ignore. That's what I'm saying. And it might be a reason to take Jefferson over Kupp, going back to one of our original Vikings takes, because as you said, I love the way you put it really simplistically, Paul, because we can all think about our bodies and getting older.
Yeah.
Aches and pains and things like that. Obviously, old in NFL terms is like not our age, but it's on week 1, it's gonna feel as good as it's gonna feel all year. And it's already to where he can't practice regularly. And they said that he got that platelet-rich injection, and they hoped that was going to get it they just said it didn't get to where they hoped it would be.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying his elbow is going to explode like Ben Roethlisberger. I think that Stafford, as we know from his career, he'll grit his teeth and he'll play through whatever. But that doesn't mean fantasy ceilings. That doesn't mean an overachiever offense. That means, well, he grits his teeth and he makes plays when he needs to, kind of like what we saw at the end of the year last year. Yeah. Maybe it was already affecting him. Okay, buy or sell. Michael Thomas is back to his old self.
Well, almost statistically impossible for him to be back to where he was before. But cautiously optimistic based on everything that we've seen and heard that from his play. It looks like the ankle's finally right. His game was never predicated on speed. So, I'm not worried that he's lost some of that, but if the ankle's good enough that he can do all of the same cutting and get all the same separation he used to, and then I'm cautiously optimistic, still have him at wide receiver 42. So I'm not putting him anywhere near where he was coming out of 2019, but he was wide receiver 70 in May. So, he's slowly been inching his way up, and to the point that he's in the conversation now with other players that I feel like are going to be quasi-regular contributors for your team in the Brandon Ayuk territory, Devonta Smith. I've got George Pickens right in that area. That's where I've got him sitting right now. How do you feel?
I think in that 5th, 6th round range, there's maybe late 4th even. I love Darnell Mooney. I love Darnell Mooney. I'd love Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'd love Gabriel Davis. And I feel like that's about where I would also consider Michael Thomas. Now, I love those 3 young ascendant guys more than Thomas because I love the unknown, the allure of the unknown. but there's the allure of the unknown here too with, Jameis Winston. He's lit a few fantasy fires in a good way in the past. And Michael Thomas himself pointed out, it's great how Michael Thomas points out the things we do. Even with Taysom Hill, when he was playing with this ankle injury, he had 9 for 100. So now he's got better players with him with Landry and Olave, but we'll see. I do think that the fantasy hive mind, if we look at the ADP, is absorbing this slowly, and it may well be that we watch week 1, right? Who does New Orleans have week 1? I love talking in terms of real games because they're so close. Atlanta. Oh,
yeah, that feels good.
it may well be that he goes 9 for 100 in week 1, and we say, why did everybody let Michael Thomas get stolen at the 5th round, 6th round, 7th round? But it may be that all of those guys are steals. We will see. Okay. Instead of a buy or sell, I'll put it this way. How far does Antonio Gibson have to fall for you to consider him now?
Oh boy. The news has been all bad, right? Did not look good in the first preseason game. Right now, sitting at running back 30 for me. So I think I'm starting to get interested roughly round 6.
I mean, would you take him over Dameon Pierce, though?
No, I have Dameon Pierce 5 spots higher.
Yeah. I mean, or would you take him over a Seattle back?
I'd rather have Kenneth Walker. Although, by the way, he didn't do much in the first game either, by the way. But yeah, I would rather have Kenneth Walker.
Well, Rashad Penny already broke the injury seal with the groin. So it didn't take long. Okay. What about the same question? How far would Josh Jacobs have to fall for you to want to take him?
I'm so off of this running back by committee. I want no part of it. The only possible way this plays out well for Jacobs, and it's conceivable, is if they go DeMarco Murray on his 4th season.
Right.
Which maybe they end up doing that, where the Raiders just decide to grind him up and then let him go to free agency. Otherwise, I think this backfield is going to be very convoluted. We've seen other Patriots backfields with Josh McDaniels that have been frustrating, but Zamir White brought over Brandon Bolden. Amir Abdullah may be the James White of this offense and may pick up a lot of receptions. Yeah. Kenyon Drake is a threat. Too many, just too many players that provide the opportunity to take carries away from Josh Jacobs. I've got him at running back 32. But boy, I don't feel good about taking him at 32.
Right. Well, see, here's the thing, right? The players that we're moving up right now, Paul, you may move him up as high as a certain spot on your rankings, but then when you do a draft tomorrow, you realize, I'll take him even a round earlier than that. And the guys that we're moving down, you may think, okay, I would take him about here. And then when he's on the board, you're like, nah, I don't even really want him there.
And I know.
Trust that.
Definitely guilty of that.
Well, and you should trust that. I definitely think that the exercise. So here's something I'll toss out there. If you're a fantasy football analyst, a fake fortune teller, then every time you do your rankings, and I mean, even if you do them a half an hour later, they should probably be different.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, rankings are not firm and in stone. Rankings are a way to try to capture a snapshot of something that's elusive. But when you're on the clock and you have to decide to select player, that's the real intelligence.
Real test. Yep.
That's the real intuition inside of you, not this exercise where you put players in a list in order. Okay, speaking of players in a list in order, for off the rails, and we've had lots of fun off the rails, but we're going to be super topical here. If you don't know, Paul Charchian has brought Guillotine Leagues to the world. And I wrote an article. We just did a staff draft. It was so much fun. I love spreading. I want to be like Johnny Appleseed of Guillotine Leagues. And I wrote something up for Footballguys, both about why they're fun and my take on strategy. And I think we see definitely eye to eye on fun. But for Guillotine Leagues, and again, if this is the first time people have heard this, you can give them like the, I think, what do the kids call it now? Elevator pitch or something like that.
Yes.
But I really want to know if you thought my strategy tips were good strategy tips for Guillotine League.
Oh, they're fantastic. And, usually people, when there's been articles written about Guillotine League, usually people have riffed off of my article on our website. I've got a fairly generic one. You obviously crafted this with a lot of love as you tried to guide people towards what makes Guillotine Leagues unique, which is you're not trying to win. You're just trying to not be last. And it really brings a very different draft strategy to the table than traditional use. And I thought this was not to cast aspersions on anything prior that has been written on Guillotine Leagues, but this was the most thoughtful Guillotine League article I've seen written.
Well, I like the Guillotine Leagues, and I'll give folks the pitch again. It's mortality. It's the mortality of the fantasy football playoffs every single week. So it's going to mean something when you set your lineup. It's going to mean something when you draft. And a couple other things I'll point out, some high points from the article. It's an 18-team league, so everybody's going to have a position or 2 or 3 on their roster in their lineup. I'm sorry, that they're not going to like.
That's right.
You're going to have to punt a position or 2. You're going to start somebody you would take in the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th round. Maybe it's Dameon Pierce if he doesn't go too high on the boards. And the waiver wire, not to be gruesome about it, but you feed on the corpse of the team that was that was eliminated.
That's right.
And it means players that are never on the waiver wire in any league you've ever been in are going to be on the waiver wire. And it creates that short-term, long-term strategy, balancing those two against each other. And it's great. Monday nights, I know the league I've been doing with you for years, Paul, you send out the email Monday during the day. Here's what's going to happen. If this player scores over this team's going to survive, and it may put this team on the chopping block. This team can't improve, but if these 3 teams get over them, and it's exciting. Even if you're not involved, even if you don't have a dog in the fight, it makes Monday Night Football more exciting. And everybody needs to check out Guillotine Leagues, guillotineleagues.com. And I guess how have you felt about how the format has been received? What are you getting back from the fantasy football community about this?
Yeah, so this is my 3rd company in the fantasy sports space, going back to Fantasy Football Weekly and Fanball, and then we did League Safe, and now this. This is the most gratifying company and product I've ever been a part of, because I've never been, for all the utility like League Safe brought and continues to bring, but it's not something people got so excited about. This is Guillotine Leagues is the kind of thing where people this is the greatest fantasy experience I've ever had in my life. I've never played anything like this. This is, I can't be in just one because I'm worried if I get cut in week 4, right. I need to be in more just in case something goes wrong. And so I've never gotten a response like this to anything I've ever done. And so just emotionally, it's just so gratifying to have found and introduced a whole new way to play to people that they're just so excited about, Sig. And yeah, so just, emotionally, I'm just so happy about Guillotine Leagues and the acceptance that it's had.
And what I like about it, and are you part of board game culture too, Paul? Am I imagining that you are?
Yes.
And it shows because it's wonderful. Right now, Noah is obsessed with Monopoly, by the way. And I've learned, I actually write a Monopoly strategy article with all the Monopoly I played. Anyway, but my point is, like board games, life is like a board game, right? I mean, you're given this initial set of materials to work with and an objective, although in life we kind of make up the objective. And then there are rules that you have to navigate, and then otherwise it's kind of up to you how to decide how to achieve that objective within those rules with those materials. And I think in fantasy football, the materials are just understanding what's going on with all 32 teams, but the rules and the objective it's open-ended.
Yeah,
you can come up with anything. You can come up with any format. You can even tie it into other things. So I like Guillotine Leagues not just for the format and the excitement and the juices they get flowing participating in one or discovering them, but I think it points the way towards a whole world, a whole amusement park full of ways that we can use this obsession to enjoy ourselves and make the time pass. Go ahead.
Yeah, and for most of us that have now been playing 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it's fun to just have some new ways to think about the game we love and put it in a totally different kaleidoscope than what you're used to looking through when we've been trained for 5, 10, 15, 20 years to try to build these high-end rosters that can be the best of 12 teams, when now we're trying to just not be the worst of 18 teams and then not be the worst of 17 and not be the worst of 16, 15, 14, 13. And you get to exercise your mind in a way that we never have as fantasy owners. And that part of it is really fun for those of us that have been playing a long time and just want to get in some fresh reps and new ways to think and exercise our brain a little differently.
Yeah, I think that fantasy football is full of people who think too much. I mean, myself guilty as charged at the top of that list. And that's what's great about it, though, is when you have a new puzzle, you have a new format, it's really stimulating and it's fun to match wits against lots of other people who think too much about things. And my other guillotine tip for folks out there, and I thought about this more after I read the article, and I wish I had actually spent more time on this point, Paul. For the first half of the season, 90% chance you're going to survive just by luck, just by not being the poor fool who's running back left on the first play that week, right?
Yeah.
So I actually think there's a lot of room for variance, like the high variance draft strategies. I'm not quite sure how to put that into practice because I haven't done enough guillotine leagues yet. But I think if you just factor in like just by dumb luck, you probably aren't going to get eliminated, say, in the first 4 or 5 weeks. The odds are on your side that as long as you have 8 guys that are playing in the NFL, you'll probably survive. And you can mess around, you can mess around, but I'm not quite sure how to put that into action yet. What I do know how to put in action is making a good show with Paul Charchian, who's always one of our favorite guests here on the couch. Thanks, everybody. Heard from a lot of people. It just took a couple weeks off up in Michigan, but we're back. Lots of articles, football guys, lots of great stuff coming all around the fantasy football universe. I know the Fantasy Football Expo just happened, so people are excited. It's exciting. There's actionable information. It's just going to get more and more exciting from here, mostly because y'all are the best audience, the best community that we could possibly ask to serve. It's great to be spending more time with you, as we always do at this time of year, and we ask you to stay classy.